Well, the goal is to become skilled in word of righteousness, as it says in chapter 6, verse 1. It says to go on toward perfection. Well, there may be some in here that willingly admit that we're a little bit perfectionistic about things, but probably for all of us, even if we do say I'm a perfectionist, it's usually said with a wince a little bit, with something that we somehow perceive with a little bit of negativity. It kind of trips us up to hear perfection, but there's another way to think about that. And if you have an NIV Bible, it's going to say it in that translation. And it's the word maturity. It means completion. We are wanting to move on towards completion, towards maturity, towards perfection in that sense. I want you to think for me just a minute about perfection in a couple of different ways. One, you all have probably heard an orchestra before. You've heard our fine orchestra. You've heard other orchestras before. What makes a perfect performance from a perspective of an orchestra is that people are listening to each other, that the sounds are balanced out, that everybody has their eyes on the conductor, that they can hear the people next to them, and they're not sticking out too much. Long hours of rehearsal culminate in a perfect performance. It's not any one thing that's done. It's a combination of a lot of things, and it's rare, frankly, that a group of that many people comes together to make a perfect performance. I think the same could be done, thought about from an athletic standpoint. Some of you have played sports, and you think about a perfect game or perfect race, a marathon runner. There's lots of things that have to come into play for a marathon runner to run a perfect place. The weather has to be perfect. The people around you can't fall down in front of you. You have to wear even the right clothes for something like this. You can't have gotten a cold. All of these kind of things are coming together to culminate in a perfect race. It's a balancing act, and it's something that you strive for, that you move toward. You can't just give up because we sounded terrible, or because I sprained my ankle. All of these things are working towards perfection, towards maturity, towards being everything that we have the potential to be. Well, I think that is what our goal is here as we think along these terms, moving from drinking in the milk of our spiritual training to stepping into being nourished by solid food. Our theme for this semester in chapel is taking the next step. I don't know where you are in your faith, but as we enter this new semester together, I want that to be our challenge. I want each one of us to be taking a step towards maturity, a step towards completion, towards being all that God has intended us to be. I know that we're not going to probably reach perfection by May 7th or 8th or whatever day finals gets here. My guess is that we probably won't be perfect, but our goal is to take one step closer into maturity with God. I almost titled this sermon, How to Be Lactose Intolerant, but I thought that might hit a little too close to home for some of you who don't like the idea of being lactose intolerant. But that's what I want us to think about. I want us to become a little bit uncomfortable with just receiving kind of the basics of our faith, the milk, if you will. We must desire and act on those desires for solid food as we move towards maturity. Somebody gave you a slip of paper when you came in. It's just a little piece of paper. I want you to get it out at this time. And I want us to be thinking about steps into maturity that we can be taking this semester. I kind of have 3 categories on there, and I'm going to give you a minute. Roger's going to play for us. I want to give you a minute to be thinking about what are some steps that I need to be taking in each of these areas. The first one is studies, and you may think my studies have nothing to do with God. I'm not a religion major, but this is where I would say that I actually think that no matter what you major in, whatever class you're studying, has a lot to do with God. The gifts that God's given you, learning all that you can learn so that you can be fully available to God in the future. So what are some steps that you need to take in your studies? Do you need to set aside more time? Do you need to cut down on something so that you have more time to be a faithful student? Do you need to step out of your comfort zone and talk to a professor or fellow classmates? What steps will you take in your studies? What steps will you take socially with your friendships? Perhaps you have a friend in your life that, frankly, is just a drag, and it's someone that you love, but you have a hard time with them. What are some steps that you need to take with friends? Is there somebody you need to share your faith with? Are there friends that you need to reach out to? And then with spiritual life, these are the hard questions, I think. Have you settled for milk in your spiritual life? Are you being fed passively like a child would be fed without using much discernment? And where do you need to step out in faith spiritually? Should you join a small group, which we have great opportunities to do? Should you go on the mission trip to Greensburg on spring break? Should you meet with a friend for accountability and prayer? I'm just going to give you a few minutes as Roger plays to think through different steps that you can take to grow into maturity.